All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming this morning for this faculty town hall. Welcome to the beginning of the semester, and really happy to be here and share a number of things. Maybe many of you have heard me use the quote, in our family, we talk about 10 to the obvious. And so this this online town hall will be about, I think, kind of the obvious things that are in my head right now. I think a lot of things we're going to talk about today maybe you're a little bit familiar with, and so this is a chance to dig into those. But as you can imagine, there's just a ton of things happening on campus at the beginning of the semester, and so we're here to just address a bunch of them. I'm going to talk for hopefully about 20-25 minutes. A large number of my colleagues are here. We probably have 8 or 9 or 10 folks kind of in the wings, ready to answer some questions, from administration and finance to research to faculty affairs to undergraduate education. A lot of folks to HR. Folks are here to answer some of the questions. And so I think if it's okay, so one little, two little procedural things. Use the Q&A. Feel free, absolutely, to post questions in the Q&A, and we'll address them either in real time as they come in, or we'll save them for the Q&A. I think we're ready to get started. There was one other thing I was going to say, and I've already forgotten what that is, but I'm sure it'll come to mind. So next slide, please. So these are things we're going to talk about. I'll give just a little bit of quick news, and some of that is, rah kinds of things, some of which you've heard of, but really address the things that I think are very contemporary. Faculty and staff compensation, because I know that that's affected many of you, and want to maybe talk about that really briefly. Post-tenure review. We just passed the faculty handbook language on Tuesday, and so we certainly I'm certainly going to talk about that. Academic freedom and freedom of expression, because I think that's very, very timely, not only on our campus, but on many other campuses. And then a couple of initiatives that I think are getting launched this term. Next slide, please. All right, so some big things are happening on campus. That the John Lewis Student Center reopened. If you haven't been over there, you should absolutely do that. Science Square, kind of on the off of North Avenue on the other side of the tracks. Again, that's a brand new initiative around biotech and biosciences. And then of course Tech Square Phase 3. We got approval from the Board of Regents, and the planning on that is well underway. Those are some big things that have happened just even in the last a few months, and a ton of other things. The Rambling Wreck Garage, check that out over at the Student Center. Really cool, coming together. So next slide, again, just touching on a couple things. You maybe know the U.S. News rankings came out last week. I think most of the news was quite good, whether it's engineering, computer science, business as a whole. Programs all went up in rankings. That's all generally very good news. Of course, we shouldn't be entirely driven by those rankings, but we can't ignore them. And I think one of the things that I think folks who saw this noticed that among publics, we dropped down to number 15 from number 10. And we're doing a deep dive. I think we have a pretty good idea, at least we have a pretty good idea why that happened. There are some reputational elements to that ranking, but there's a lot of other metrics or quantitative items tied to that. I think some of the things that stick out that we recognized were factors in why it is we dropped. Social mobility, a number of Pell eligible students. It's basically students that come from families with lower income was a major issue. Number of classes with students more than 50, which is viewed negatively by U.S. News, and number of classes under 20, which of course is viewed positively. Both of those have moved in the opposite direction, and they contributed to that. There's a number of other things in there. We are on top of all of those. Not necessarily to fix those points directly so that they cause us to recover in the rankings, but they're directionally correct, and they point to things that we may need to pay more attention to. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in a little bit, but I would encourage you, President Cabrera did a really good blog post on kind of just framing all of this up. We're not driven by rankings. We tend to do very well in rankings, and when we drop in some, we should pay attention to that, but not be totally driven. And there are many other metrics and other kind of rankings for which I think almost everyone knows we do quite well, particularly on return on investment of our students. So I think I can come back to and answer some of the questions there. I think President Cabrera's blog post, I think, does a very, very good job of kind of framing up the celebrations and also framing up some of the things that we can and should be tending to. But I think the big thing, at least for Pell eligible students, we are slipping. 15% of our students a couple of years ago were Pell eligible. It's now 13%. And so that is certainly, in terms of the strategic plan, that's an issue, and or that's one of the focal points, as well as the new capital campaign. I won't talk about it here, but we announced a $2 billion capital campaign. A very significant portion of the fundraising that will take place in the next capital campaign is around need-based aid for students. In fact, it's our largest item. About $400 million goal out of the $2 billion goal is focused directly on need-based aid. We only meet about 30 or 40% of the financial need of students anyway. So a little bit off topic there, but it really highlights that need. Next slide, please. So you know that we have plans to grow enrollment. And we know that there are pain points tied to that, and I'm sure there were going to be some questions around that. This is the data, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the investments that we're making and some of the data and things that we're learning, even just in the last term. So right now, 4,600 or so new students on campus. We are really unique among our peers in terms of transfer students. So 27% of the new students on campus are transfer students, and I can't remember the number, but right around 20% of our graduating students this past spring are transfer students. We're very, very proud of the many different pathways that students can find their way to Georgia Tech, and it does make us unique, among our peers. The first year class, you can see there's a number of things to celebrate, whether it's underrepresented students, women students, first generation students, and Georgia residents. The numbers of those students continue to rise, really aligned with our strategic plan. Next slide, please. This is a really good eye opener for me around the changes that have happened, really even just in the last 3 years. Total enrollment. You can see the significant increase in total enrollment. A lot of that is tied to the online masters. I know folks feel kind of on campus some of the pinch points regarding undergraduate students, and you can see that's the second line, but a very, very large amount is due to the OMS programs. You can see those have grown really, really significantly, as have applications. The number of admitted students, our acceptance rate, overall acceptance rate has dropped from the number of applicants. And I think you hear the president all the time, and I say the thing, I can't emphasize it enough. Whereas we reject more and more students that apply to Georgia Tech, and that can't be a point of pride. Right? I mean, it is certainly we're becoming a more and more selective institution, but I think given that we're already really the greatest source of a lot of technical talent, that we are simply not serving as many students as we could serve, and I think we're trying to find ways to do that. Some modest growth in the undergraduate population and other things which we'll talk about a bit later. But I think we all feel a ton of pride that we will continue to be the greatest source of technical talent. Companies are flocking to Atlanta because of that, because of our diverse talent, and it's very much part of our strategic plan. We saw there's the information about Pell eligible students. Of course, research awards, which are on the front end, continue to grow really significantly, and there are pain points tied to that. I think many people experienced some of those pain points, as well as research expenditures. And so we're not necessarily going to talk about the research side here, but there are significant, we're not going to talk about the changes that are underway in research administration, but there are really significant efforts on that side as well. Next slide, please. So to say a little bit about what it is we're investing and we're trying to invest tied to the enrollment increases, here's a number of them, 87 new faculty and staff positions. Kind of couple that with this fall, we have 94 new faculty coming to campus. About 65 are tenure track faculty. The rest are, other instructional faculty. Some of those are replacements from folks that have left, but you can see a net positive 87 new faculty working on retention, working on other investments in startup package, because of course startup packages are extraordinarily are becoming increasingly costly. New investments there, of course, tending to minimum stipends for graduate students, and also that we had an uptick in yield for the first year students coming to Georgia Tech. Right, we had a target for a number of first year students, and our yield was even higher. And actually, we're not the only ones. UGA had the same. Many of the public flagship peers are seeing that same kind of shift. You may know, as a side note, 20 of the 26 institutions at the University System of Georgia are losing enrollment. The others are gaining enrollment. We're gaining enrollment significantly. Some of that is organic through OMS, and some of that is that modest, intentionality around the undergraduate education. So we did have some uptick. We had an additional number of students in the freshman class, some of which ended up in METS in Oxford through our first year study abroad program, and in some, I think the total number of additional new students above what is we expected was only about 50 or so this fall. But again, provided support, went out early and did our very best to provide support for that. Next slide, please. So that we made some adjustments. I'm going to say roughly a year ago, maybe not quite that long ago, for Staff First. Faculty were very, very patient, and we said, for several months, it's coming. The adjustments, kind of market adjustments, compensation adjustments that we did. We went out into the marketplace, both for staff and faculty, to see where the market was and how misaligned we were to the market. We were able to do it for staff first. And then the $5,000 cost of living came from the governor's office, and then the adjustments for faculty took place. One little data point that I've kind of heard the question, kind of anticipating the question, as we did those adjustments, there was a cap on maximum adjustment for staff was right around 7%. We set the cap, later on, several months later, at 5% for faculty, and people ask, well, why was that? And it turns out the COLA, the $5,000 COLA, happened in the middle. We didn't know that was going to happen on the staff side, and so in order to really, I would say, save a little bit of money, but able to get more money out, we capped the maximum at 5% per faculty, which we thought was pretty reasonable. Those adjustments were based on market data, and we hired an outside consultant. Took a long time because I think market adjustments tied to faculty was something that's really not common at all other institutions, and so we went and did that. I think that is new for. I mean, I guess. I think our team, the whole team, deserves some credit because that's brand new for Georgia Tech. It has that kind of adjustment has not been done in at least 10 years, if ever, the 26 years I've been here. Executive leadership team, the president, the whole team is absolutely committed. Separate from merit, to be aware of the market and to be as better aligned with the market as we can. This is a start. I think we now have a baseline that we're going to start from. I know Sky Duckett, she's here. We've been talking an awful lot. She's our new vice president for human resources. We have made a solid commitment to continue doing this, to continue in addition to merit, to be cognizant of the market, and when budget allows, to continue this. We know we have a lot more work to do, and it's going to take more than a year. It's going to take more than 2 years to get better aligned with the market that we compete with. But the point that I want to make is we are solidly committed to continuing this work as much as we can. Next slide, please. Post-tenure review. I'm going to assume we had 400 to 500 folks show up on Tuesday night. where the handbook language was approved. It's not just post-tenure review, it's a new faculty evaluation process. I'm not going to go to this in detail. I remember the other thing I was going to say at the beginning. This is obviously an online town hall. We are scheduling 14 in-person faculty meetings that will be in-person only. Those will unfold in October and November, really talking about exactly these same things so we can continue these conversations. And so I fully assume that this will continue to be a topic of a conversation. Again, we had some wins in this. Why do I say this? I had the great pleasure of being the lead provost among the 26 provosts during the last year. Was very, very active in negotiations with the University System Georgia as the policies were set, as guidelines became built. We were very, very much involved with trying to get this to a really good place. We won some things, and there are things that turned out that we weren't so that we wish had turned out differently. The steering committee that was put together, Rhett, Carrie, Dawn, Michelle, Bonnie, John Colton, did a truly extraordinary job on your behalf to get us as far as we could within the guidelines that we had. And we had an 87% approval of the faculty handbook on Tuesday night, coupled with a resolution that came right after that said we did this under duress. And we didn't want to do this. We knew we had to, and I'm super, super, super proud and thankful for, number one, how many people showed up, how many people cared. The steering committee did an absolutely, I'm sorry, I'm repeating myself, I know it's obnoxious, did an absolutely fantastic job in getting us to the best possible place. So we will be submitting that handbook language to USG probably in the next day. They will review it. We know that they're doing a thorough review. I had another meeting with the 4 R1 provosts today talking about our strategy going forward and engaging them as we all send in our plans. There has been very good communication with them. I'm cautiously optimistic. There certainly will be edits to what it is we sent, and we will be really active in that over the coming months. But I just want to say thank you to everyone. Again, if there are questions that folks specifically have that want to ask here, we'll do the best we can to address them. A ton of stuff happened Tuesday night, so I just won't belabor the point for now. Next slide. A lot happened in the last legislative session, and a lot happened before that. And I think folks are aware of the issues that are on the table with our legislature, whether it's around diversity, equity, inclusion, whether it's around critical race theory, and a whole bunch of other things. I think that renewed a couple of different efforts that took place this year. Faculty governance, I would say, rewrote and re-clarified the faculty's position on academic freedom and freedom of expression. Believe it or not, academic freedom is a concept that is defined initially by the AAUP, and it's a faculty-owned concept, right? There's not necessarily like legal frameworks around it. It's a faculty-led and faculty-owned concept. In fact, Georgia Tech faculty governance revisited that, approved a bunch of language around that, and we created a website that not only highlights that language and that work, but just really encapsulates the whole area of academic freedom and freedom of expression. Together with tenure, academic freedom, it's hard to imagine anything that's more important to us as academics, to our mission as a university, that those are held in the highest and strongest positions. And so, whether it's what it is we're anticipating this legislative session, what it is we're doing to inform our broader community on the importance of academic freedom, this is a renewed effort this fall. I'll be talking about this more, as we do the town halls. And to the new chancellor's credit, he's talking an awful lot about that. And I don't know if everyone has seen, he sent a letter to the general letter to the faculty. He has been talking about it time and time again. I'll be honest with you, he believes in it. I do believe that he believes in it, and that it is a core tenet of what we believe in. And so it's something that that's just extraordinarily important, that you have the autonomy and the responsibility for what you do in the classroom and the research that you undertake, as just being vitally important to Georgia Tech, vitally important to our students, vitally important to society. And so please take a look at what it is we've done there. And again, if there's questions, we'd be happy to talk about that. Next slide, please. This, I think, is second to last slide, just to give you a little bit of a heads up on the things that we're very active on as the term gets going. Both of these come out of the strategic plan. First is transformative teaching and learning. Larry Jacobs, you know, is new, a couple months into his role as Senior Vice Provost for Education and Learning, leading a task force on transformative teaching and learning, one of the major initiatives that come out of the strategic plan. Very broad engagement, you know, across campuses, you know, focusing on students engaging in meaningful and experiential learning. We are already a leader. We're already doing many of these things extraordinarily well, and we're going to continue that, and that group will, you know, come with recommendations. I think the other thing is, and you may have seen some of the announcements, again, something that came out of the strategic plan is really lifetime learning. We've built an extraordinary expertise in things like professional education, K through 12 outreach. The OMS programs, I think, are an unmitigated success. And we are in a very privileged position to be more aggressive and more strategic for the future of Georgia Tech, to kind of, you know, think of learners that we might engage before they come to campus, and learners that we engage, say, after they leave campus. You can think of this new academic unit as being more intentional around that. I think you can expect that a bunch of work has been done. 3 task forces have just been put in place 2 weeks ago to really dig in on what this academic unit can look like from both an educational and research perspective, from an operational perspective, because there is a real operational benefit and expertise we have in things like OMS in professional education, and then you know, I would say some change management, because I think this is going to be an increasingly important part, you know, of our mission, kind of engaging a broader sector of learners more and more. And so don't be surprised at all if the recommendation is that we form a new college, and we're not embarrassed and we're not shy of saying that is the aspiration. But these groups are going through to kind of frame all that up, not just to create a college, but to envision what it might look like 10 or 15 or 20 years down the road. And it's certainly going to look absolutely nothing like what it is we initially envisioned, and that's the way the College of Computing has evolved. So there's a ton of work going on in those things. And I think the last is just some personal. Next slide, please. So this is just to highlight that we're going to be doing in-person meetings. I said our office is working with the various deans, to do these in person, and you'll be getting, and they'll be going college by college, and you'll be hearing more about that in the coming weeks. That last slide. So I think I just want to make a couple of personal comments, and then we'll go to questions. Just kind of looking at the clock, I think we're more or less on track. And I mean, I think the personal comments I'll make is, I suspect many of you feel exactly like I do, exhausted, purely, completely exhausted over the last 2 years. First and foremost, and then really simultaneously, just absolutely, I am ecstatic to be on campus, to walk around, to see my colleagues, to reconnect to folks. To me, that's bringing a ton of energy, but we know very well that folks are tired and exhausted and feel like you're being asked to do more, in the context of maybe it seems like less and less things are out of our control. Things like, hey, can I do hybrid? Can I be only in person? Can I do online? We had a lot of oversight there. That oversight is gone, but we are being a bit more intentional about some of those things. And also everything that's happened with post-tenure review and evaluation feels like, doesn't feel good. And it also, some of the things that we went through, whether it's around requests for what we're doing in DEI, possible legislation on critical race theory. A lot of these things are all happening at one time, and I know very well people are exhausted. What I can promise you is we are doing our very best. We're making the commitments that we feel like we can make, but we know that there are hotspots, and we're trying to identify those hotspots, and we're not the best at gathering data. There's a whole effort around doing much, much better gathering the data to really, truly identify the hotspots, because it is easy to just say enrollment's increasing, and so every piece of what it is we do is a hotspot, and there's some truth to that, but some spots are hotter than others, and we're trying to get much better identifying those, and there's a ton of people working on those as well. I'll just share some other, really personal things. For the first time in 26 years, I actually took a significant amount of time off this summer. I needed it. I needed it badly. I thought I needed it before. Now, in hindsight, realize how badly I needed it, and just cannot encourage you enough to, if it means some things kind of fall on the floor, to take some time off. And I know it's not possible for everyone. I'd like to say it wasn't possible for me, but I did that, and I've taken on some new personal practices around that. Both it's around my scheduling, it's around what it is I'm doing on weekends, and I'd be really happy to share more about that. I've done some of that in my newsletters, and frankly, some things are just not getting done, but I know I had to tend better to myself, and I'm just kind of pleading with you to take the time and to do that assessment for yourself. I know many of you are doing that, to do that yourself and to give us ideas. We are not perfect, but we know we're doing our best, and we know that folks are going through a lot. So I will pause there. I kept it to my automatic 50-minute clock as a faculty member was in check. I did okay. And we have plenty of time, 20 minutes, maybe even a little more for questions. And so I think Michelle is the, I have no idea what the questions are so far. And so I'll turn it over to Michelle to tend to some questions.
Great, thanks, Steve. I'm looking at the questions, and we're going to bounce it off. As Steve mentioned, we have a lot of direct experts here, so I might toss a question to you, Steve, or I might toss it to somebody else. Our first question, actually, I think Sky Duckett's going to be the best person to answer it. It's from Craig Forrest. Given the shortage of finance and admin staff in the units, for example, ME has 11 finance staff shortage currently, what more can be done to attract and incentivize and reward good candidates to these positions? Are our hands tied by the Board of Regents or HR? Just get a better sense there.
Yeah, and it's a great question. Great question, and pretty much on the money with the data that we are seeing on turnover right now. So finance, along with areas like IT and research administration, are some of our biggest shortage areas right now. And the answer, about restrictions is kind of that it's a blend. There's a little bit, of limitations because we're a state agency. Like, we can't do big cash bonuses like some companies are doing. I've been hearing, people leaving, for $50,000 cash bonuses. We do have limitations on that, but for a lot of staff, which is mostly, what's in these finance roles, they still have room within our own classification system for departments to make pay increases. And then we also did just submit a critical skills incentive plan to the university system office that would include finance positions. We hope to have that approved next month. And what that does is provide some financial incentives for candidates in these high need areas. And pay is a huge factor for staff positions, but in addition to pay, there are things that can be done in the workplace that we have full authority and autonomy to do, like flexible work schedules, remote work options, having really good technology equipment. Those are things we can do within our own local guidelines. And then we fully realized, because I've been here 8 months and we didn't have much of a presence, out in the market to help get words out about these jobs that you all have open in your administrative offices. So there's a lot more marketing and branding work that we can do to get the word out to the community. And actually today is the first day of fall, and we're launching our new recruitment Twitter and TikTok. So if you want to help recruit for finance jobs in your administrative offices, it's GATECH Careers. So GATECH careers on Twitter and TikTok. But great question, and I'd love to have additional suggestions come in addition to the things that I just mentioned.
Great, thank you, Sky. We have another question I'm going to give it to Steve, really talking about that post-tenure review language, and the question is being asked, it's anonymous, but thanking you for your work and absolutely agreeing that the steering committee did a great job. But what is your reaction to the AAUP censor, and do you think we will be able to repair or get off the censure list?
I support the resolution. I think it's accurate. I think the goal of continuing to work. So I mean, we're going to learn a bunch of things, right? Through the next year or two or three, we're going to learn how effective the policy was, the things that the policy was intended to do, and maybe what it doesn't intend to do. Fully plan to be giving that feedback to USG. So, for example, the 1-year PIP after a failed post-tenure review, we fought really hard that was not the right way to do it. And it may turn out that it's not as effective as it could be, so things like that, I think we will continually give them feedback on that. And, with some luck, that might even have them revisit either some of their policies and so on. But I mean, so I think the intention of us continuing to work, giving them feedback that was in the resolution, I fully support.
Okay, great. Thank you. The next question, I think Sky's going to be back on the question box right now. Did the salary adjustment include racial and gender equity?
So the recent faculty market study, and I'll do a little lesson if it's my turn to teach a little bit. I don't know, I'm not as good at it as you all are, but there's a difference between a market equity study, which is the activity that we did this summer, which is, comparing our rates to the market and, our, what's identified as our competitors. And then there's a pay parity study, of which the purpose is to identify gaps in protected classes. So for the market study that we did this summer, we did do what's called a disparate impact analysis. In other words, to make sure that the market recommendations and getting everyone caught up to a baseline in the market did not do any harm to any protected classes in our workforce. So we did that with the market study this summer. But I am pleased to say also that this year we are undertaking a pay parity study as part of our affirmative action plans. And that's where we'll identify existing gaps by protected classes and recommend strategies that are targeted with the purpose of closing those gaps. So there is a little difference in purposes of these different types of compensation studies, but we did have an equity look at the market study that we just did this summer.
Great, thank you. Our next question is for Larry Jacobs. They want to know more about the Transformative Teaching and Learning Steering Committee and who's on it.
Hi, thanks, Michelle, and thanks everyone for being here today. So the Transformative Teaching and Learning Steering Committee, it was formed in April. It was a sprint with a goal in July for July 1 temporary report, basically a plan for a plan, and it's moving on forward from there. The process was, I was brand new in this job, so I went to each of the academic deans, asked them for nominations. We had members from each of the colleges. We had a follow-on for actually Wendy Neustetter, who had worked on the strategic plan, the education piece. And then we had 3 students. I can go through the list if you want. I was on it. Devin Desai, Shatak Shi out of Ivan Allen, Betsy DeSalvo, Stephen Gerardo, David Joyner, Sabir Khan, Wendy, Michelle, you were on it, Carrie Shepler, and Michelle Walker, and then the students.
Great, thank you, Larry. Our next question is for Steve. The comment is that faculty are exhausted and tired, and one idea is to stagger and give people a special pandemic-related sabbatical for one semester over in the next 3 years. Can you comment or think of some other opportunities here?
I mean, I love the idea, right? And so the question is, how do we figure out how to do that? So for example, so we don't have sabbaticals, right? Everyone knows that, but the various of the schools have come up with creative ways to give some breathing room for folks, every 6 years and 7 years. I was chair of ECE. We had a policy every 7 years. Faculty got a one course release tied to that. Again, not quite a sabbatical. People use that in really creative ways to maybe get an entire semester off. I'd love to figure out a way to do that same kind of thing. Obviously, it costs. There's a cost tied to that. Someone needs to fill in, but if we can come up with a way to do that, I mean, certainly schools and colleges have the ability to do that already on their own without, without our office doing that. And I love that idea. If there's a lot of interest among, say, chairs and deans to do that, maybe we can pitch in a little bit. Chairs and deans can pitch in a little bit, and we could figure out a way to do that. I know, the pinhead in me says, hey, the best things we can do is time and money, and this is time. If we can find ways to give folks back time through something like that, I'd love it. So I'd love, maybe so great idea, and maybe we can all at the different layers pitch in a little bit to be able to do that.
Great, thank you. The next question, I'm going to take the prerogative and answer part of, and then I'm going to flip it to Larry. But will the new Institute initiative for transformative teaching and learning be reflected in the RPT process? And how will academic faculty, both tenure and non-tenure track, be supported to adequately meet new transformative teaching expectations? And I'll answer that in a second. The second part of that question is, I'm on board with this initiative to better support our increasingly diverse student population, but it risks becoming an unfunded mandate without appropriate support for faculty. And so I'll turn that over to Larry. But one of the things, and one of the reasons I was specifically asked to be on the committee with Larry, is that we know that anything that we do around transformative teaching and learning is going to, it's going to be to the great benefit of our students, but it's also going to have a significant impact on our faculty. And so keeping our eye on what are the opportunities and ways that we can support the faculty and the work that they're doing, give them the opportunities to succeed, and then also be recognized and rewarded for engaging in that. And we know the high impact practices that we undertake here on campus and the transformative teaching is really going to lead towards student success, and that's one of those critical areas that we're evaluating faculty on. And so that becomes one of our most important things as we're working through this, our proposals. How can we support our faculty? Larry, do you have more that you want to add?
Sure, Michelle, thanks. And I would say, first of all, it was a wonderful committee, and it's a committee that the work is continuing. These were a lot of very bright people, but we had a short time period. It was very much so a sprint. As Michelle said, we came out very much so on support for faculty. We talked about connections for students, and we also tried to get a sense of all the things that we're doing now on campus, because there's a lot of really good things that we have. And then from that, how do we set up, let's say, support for faculty who want to be innovative, who are not quite sure how to do it? We talked about, ways to enhance the students, to have the term connections between each other, themselves and the faculty, their curricular to the real world. Now, how are we going to make this happen? This is, again, an ongoing process. We're one of a number of strategic planning processes. There's one on enrollment, there's the lifelong learning, the sustainability next. So we're looking to connect with all these different groups. There's a little bit of money that we're looking now between now and this fiscal year to roll out to run a couple of different pilots in areas that people are interested in. And then there's also a very large opportunity coming up with our SACS COC reaccreditation, 5-year reaffirmation on the new quality enhancement plan. So these are all areas that moving forward there'll be opportunities for folks to get engaged and then to make some significant changes.
Great, thank you. I'm going to give this next question to Steve. Can you tell us more about the Lifetime Learning College and what type of degrees would this college offer?
So I think, great question. Great question. I think the way that I'm thinking about it so far, so first of all, we just launched a task force that's really designed around that. I think the work that's been done so far has been huge opportunity in this space. How do we realize it? And so there's a task force led by Jonathan Clark in Scheller and Charles Isbell from College of Computing and a number of folks in there that's really just starting to answer this question. I think I'm going to kind of answer it in a slightly different way because we made some organizational changes where the Center for 21st Century Universities, which hopefully folks are at least a little familiar with C21U, SEISMIC, which is our K through 12 outreach, and Georgia Tech, elements of Georgia Tech professional education have all been kind of brought together, kind of thinking about that as the educational and research core and heart of where the college might start. There is a ton of other kinds of expertise throughout Georgia Tech, but if you think of C21U, SEISMIC, and kind of the educational and research elements of GTPE are kind of coming together, reporting to Nelson Baker. That kind of, you can kind of think of that as the initial start of the heart and soul of the educational and research mission of the new college. Their job is then to begin to kind of brainstorm, the kinds of degree programs we want. Our expertise obviously in technology, we have expertise in online learning. We have we learned a ton through COVID. So I don't think we have any preconceived ideas of those degree programs. Honestly, I think the asset that we have, and one of the reasons we've decided to kind of go this route is I think OMS has been a focal point in that maybe ahead of time people are wondering, hey, are we really doing this? Is this really the right thing for us to do? I think because it's a unmitigated success, I think we have faculty buy-in, we have credibility, we have support that many of our peers don't have. I think we need to be very careful, but it kind of, as we kind of move forward in the degree programs in this space, I think our culture and the belief among our faculty, at least that's my impression, is that we have general support for this kind of thing, as opposed to outsourcing it, which many other institutions have done. So I know I didn't answer it directly, but hopefully I give you a directional answer to where I think it's heading.
Great, thank you, Steve. Our next question, I think, Steve, we're going to keep you on deck, and then Larry might want to follow up. As we move forward, what role do you see online or hybrid courses having? What role should they play in helping to address some of these increases in enrollment and the lack of classroom space?
Solidly, they absolutely should. I mean, I think they solidly should. I see I go live, and so I start talking, and I'm not sure you catch the first part. So they absolutely should. Previously during the pandemic, we were in a place of oversight from the University System of Georgia on all of these. That oversight is gone, and so we now have the ability to do what we think is right. And I would say that's really school by school, college by college. I would say my preference right now is to address it in a way that that facilitates student choice. So for some courses for which there's a large number of large sections, being able to offer purely online or being able to offer hybrid options as a way of giving students choice I think that also turns out to be faculty choice and how it is we want to do that. I think that's that we should be doing more of that. Do I envision or would I support 50% of our courses in that? No way. But I think, 8, 10%, kind of starting there, and we're probably pretty close to that. I think we have a ton of people with fantastic expertise. We've proven that those experiences, hybrid or purely online, in some cases are even better than in person. Let's go for it. I think that's the. I think we're ready to do more.
Should I jump in just a little, just to follow up on what Steve said again, looking from the group, the transformative teaching and learning is looking at it. We're considering, in addition to what Steve said, we want to keep the student experience in mind. We want to be very careful. Let's say we have a new first-year student comes on campus and we don't want their entire schedule to be online or be dominated by online. We want, again, does the material make sense for the online piece? That faculty, are the faculty willing? Are they looking to do it? And then for your graduation rate, the time to the degree complexity, can we use the online offerings to, again, reduce that time to graduation, maybe have students who want to do an internship or something like that, give them offerings that way. So these are all the factors that are going into these kinds of decisions.
Great, thank you, Larry. Steve, you're on deck again for the next question from Becky Grunter. Undergraduate classes are growing, which we know and that's something that's not in control of the instructor, and yet instructors are being evaluated on teaching and student success. So she's concerned that there is a disconnect here, that faculty do not control this aspect of their evaluation, but they're the ones being evaluated. Can you offer some insight here?
I hope so. I'd say a couple things. I'll just kind of go back to number of sections with increasing number of students. That's something we absolutely have to address, right? That can't continue to grow without some kind of control mechanism. So I know that's certainly true in computing. It's certainly in others. So I think the hotspots on that place we have to address. I think honestly, I'm less so. I think the gist of the question is some faculty will receive lower evaluations because they are in higher enrollment courses, and will that affect their annual evaluations? And won't, by virtue of these two factors, faculty be penalized or suffer from those? And honestly, I served as, I don't think it's just a me statement. I served as a chair, did 115 evaluations. I fully trust my colleagues in kind of being able to calibrate against those. I'm not sure that solid evidence. So I think it is true that larger sections on average get lower course evaluations. I don't think that goes instructor by instructor. I might be wrong on that data. It's probably just a gist. I would love to see that data. I think faculty that are good teaching, that get good evaluations in small classes, also get good evaluations in large classes. And I guess I would just say that's not a first order fear. It's probably not even second order concern of mine, because I really trust the chairs that are doing the evaluations. And you probably also know that the new evaluation process allows for committees of faculty to be doing the evaluations. And I really trust our colleagues to be able to, whatever calibration is needed in there, that the best instructors, regardless of size, will be recognized one way or the other.
Great, thank you, Steve. Chrissy Spencer submitted a question. I'm going to ask Paul Cohn and Lolo Hong to respond here. The increase in diversity in the first-year class is excellent to see, but she's asking what programs and resources we're adding to support and retain underrepresented students and also first-generation students.
I think Lolo, maybe you go first. Oh, here's Paul.
I just wasn't sure if my camera was working. Thanks for letting me address this question. Can you hear me okay? Can I get confirmation, please?
You're great.
All right, very good. The question pertains to the support services and our help in helping ensure that we complete our commitment to the students, in my opinion, which is not just getting them here, but getting them to the graduation and finish line. So Dr. Charmaine Troy, for example, is heading up first generation initiatives. We had our first two first generation summits this past summer. Inside that portfolio is a new mentoring program dedicated to first generation student success. The programs in OMED, for example, Challenge has expanded to serve more students, and their services during the academic year have also expanded. Stephen Girardeau, Vice Provost for Undergraduate Education, and I are searching for a new Director of Retention and Completion, and that person will help us analyze data to help inform further initiatives to help in exactly the space that this question is in. Lolo, is there anything you'd like to add, or is that not how this is working? Do I not pass the camera anywhere?
Well, I'll take a slight different pivot and maybe augment what you said. Chrissy, I think this question is so critical for us to consider, and I'm going to maybe ask us to consider some aspects that are related to structural and systemic issues. I think programs and resources are absolutely essential, and Paul has highlighted some of those. I know in student engagement and well-being, we are purposefully augmenting our programs and services in this area. But I think there are a lot of different ways that we can think about this. So I'll just offer one. It's so critical. We know that the research on belonging and community shows us that students are historically marginalized, really see value in seeing, for example, faculty or staff or administrators who they feel with whom they can relate. So I think that's something to think about, you know, as we're looking at building. There were a couple questions about increasing staff capacity, faculty capacity. We have to think about increasing that capacity, but with the particular thought to how do we increase the capacity to serve a student body that is increasingly diverse from where Georgia Tech has been and where we're going. One of the things that we're really purposely thinking about is the role of space. Space signals to students where they do belong and where they might not feel that they belong. So many of you may not be aware, we are in active conversations right now to establish at least 2 new identity-based cultural centers. So one would be Black Cultural Center, and the other, the name is not yet decided on, but it will be something that addresses the intersectionality of students' identity. So it's loosely being called the Multicultural Student Center. That's about creating place as well as programs and creating the resources, the people, if you will, that are going to be available for our students. The start of this, I invite folks to check out in the new John Lewis Student Center. We have a multicultural org space as well as a space set aside for our Black student organizations, but that is not enough. We have to keep going in that direction. So just encouraging us to think of the systemic ways that we can really shift the Georgia Tech culture too.
Great, thank you. Steve, I'm going to ask you to kind of clarify something that you had said earlier in your presentation, and then Sky, and maybe I can also provide an answer here. So there was a question, did you say that we saved money by staff not receiving the same equity adjustment as faculty to the $5,000 COLA?
I'm pretty sure that's not quite what I said. If I said it that way, it needs to be undone, and I'm going to pass to Sky because I'm going to pass to Sky.
Yeah, Steve, I heard it too at the beginning, and what you said was essentially right. You were referring to the COLA, I think, not the staff market equity, because I don't think what we spent on staff had anything to do with, what we spent or how much budget we had for faculty. But the cost of living adjustment did come in and do us a favor in between the staff equity in December and the faculty equity in the summer. So in a sense, it did save us a little money because it came in and helped get our faculty closer to their market position than they were before. Cost of living adjustment. So after that, we had, I guess you could say, less of a gap to close. I believe it was around 7.7 million that we invested, which is what we had planned on investing prior to COLA, but it got us further to our ideal market position than it would have without the COLA. So in the long term, it saves us money. But we, even with that large investment, we still have, a ways to go. So it wasn't necessarily just about the money, but I felt like that statement was referring to the cost of living adjustment saving us money.
Right. I think that was a great answer there. We only have time for 2 more questions. I know people probably have to get off to that next meeting. And this again is going to be for Steve. Given that over enrollment and also related to faculty attrition due to burnout or underpay, given that over enrollment leads to larger class sizes and this drops us in the rankings very solidly, what is the plan to appropriately scale enrollment and faculty supports to prevent dropping further?
There's some assumptions in that question that I would not quite right, but I think directionally, I'm directionally okay with the question, because I think there's data in there that might slightly refine the question, but that's okay. Those are the hotspots that I'm talking about that we're trying to identify. In some cases, with 50 additional students over and above, the over enrollment. So you have to kind of question whether that 50 over enrollment, had a dramatic impact. That's why I'm only fiddling with the question a little bit. Point being is we need to identify where the hotspots are. We had some real issues during registration, some of which were normal, some of which were abnormal. We have some folks looking into that to figure out, what corrections are needed to be made on the enrollment side, and then subsequently into, how many sections do we really have above 50? How many sections do we really have below 20? Where are the real true hotspots? How much of that is tied to classroom? How much of that is tied to time of day? How much of that? So that's the data that we're trying to dig into, and then invest in instructors, invest in advisors, invest in the resources that are needed for those hotspots. So again, I'm not going to tie I'm not going to tie directly the classroom and the number of courses above 50, which is one of the contributing factors. That's not a direct. That's not the only direct impact into slipping in the rankings. So I just want to, again, I'm kind of fiddling with the questions. There are other elements, and in fact, we are learning just in the last 2 days that how it is we gather data and how it is we report it and how it is we've kind of adjusted probably is not optimum. And I think we can report back to U.S. News in ways that may have had a different outcome from where it is we are. All of that stuff is things that we're learning. The question is perfectly fine. I would say it's directionally correct and reasonable, and we're just trying to identify those hotspots so that we can do right for our students and do right for our faculty.
Okay, great. This is going to be our last question. I'm going to, Steve, you'll have some final comments here, but I'll also answer a few key points on this question. As our undergraduate population continues to grow rapidly, what are the plans for accelerating the process of growing our faculty and other instructional resources to be able to teach more sections of more courses to meet the increased demand for high quality instruction that we want to provide our students? We're pinched now, even with the existing faculty growth, and this will get worse. We seem to have many small classrooms, but few high capacity classrooms, meaning we will need more sections for popular required courses, and thus we'll also need more instructors and/or other solutions to meet this need. And what I want to kind of comment on is the speed at which we're hiring faculty, and I know that there are many delays at the beginning of the semester, and that we definitely need to address that within faculty affairs and make that process more smooth. And we're working with Sky and her team as we're rolling out the Administrative Service Center, the ASC, in October. That focus is really going to be on improving that hiring process to make it more seamless, so that as you're needing to hire more instructors, we're able to kind of meet that demand. But Steve, do you want to talk specifically about other larger initiatives?
We're at time, and so maybe that's something that we can talk about in the in-person. And sorry to kind of cut you off there, Michelle, but I do want to be respectful of folks' time. Just a reminder that we're going to be doing a bunch of in-person. Really talking about this exact same stuff. Maybe we'll talk about a couple other things, but basically I just want to come and talk in smaller groups. about the things that are on folks' mind. And I think I'll just leave it as an enormous, enormous, enormous thank you to everyone for being here today, and for everything you do for our students, everything you do for each other. And please, please do tend to yourself. And I'm looking forward to seeing folks in person in the next month or so.